Chasidecha, because you can give chesed to rich and poor alike. It's true, Shlomo is rich. Shlomo represents Atik, Panemius of Kesser, but you can even give to the rich. So he said this is really the level of the messianic revelation. That in Shlomo's days it was Atik, but in Mashiach's time it's going to be Panemius of Atik, one step up, and that's called Ein Sof Sheberadla, the Ein Sof in the Reisha Delogis Yada, the unknowable head. What's the unknowable head? So he says here it's the Iker Inyan of Atik. When we talked about Atik, we talked about Shlomo being Atik. That was just really in relative terms. That's not the main Inyan of Atik. The main Inyan of Atik is beyond. It's the unknowable head. I don't think that's the right one. No. Do we have any more copies? So he says in the Zohar, just kind of going back a little bit here, 5 lines down, that Atik is found in 3 heads. And the Reb Chaim Vital explains that the Iker Atik is the Ein Sof itself. So it says Atik is found in 3 heads. It really means that the Ein Sof, again, not the Or Ein Sof, but the Ein Sof itself is found in 3 different places. And because it hides itself in these 3 heads, therefore the 3 heads themselves are called Atik. So what's Atik? Really the Ein Sof. But since the Ein Sof finds itself in these 3 different heads, the heads are basically different levels of Kesser. Since it finds itself in these 3 heads, those heads also take on the name Atik. And since the main Inyan of Atik is the Ein Sof inside of all 3 heads, therefore the highest head where Atik is most found, that's the Iker Inyan of Atik. Yeah?
What are these 3 heads that are supposed to represent?
So like 3 levels of Kesser, basically. Okay.
And these 3 levels, if this just Ein Sof, why are they broken into 3 heads?
Ein Sof is how it is to itself. But when the Ein Sof finds itself in other places, so then the Ein Sof, which is sort of hidden inside of different realms, that's called Atik.
Okay.
Right?
And this is in general the 3 heads. Like all 3 heads have this idea.
And therefore all 3 heads are called Atik. But the Iker Inyan of Atik is the Ein Sof inside of all of them. And therefore the one that has the Ein Sof most inside of them is the highest one. And that's what he says. But in this Maimon that we're working on, he explains that Iker Inyan of Atik is the Ein Sof in Radla. So according to the Reb Chaim Vital, they're all called Atik because the Ein Sof is found in all 3 heads. But according to the Rebbe Rashab, he's not necessarily arguing, but he's just clarifying that the main Inyan of Atik is in the highest of the 3 heads. And that's where we got up to yesterday. So we'll take it from 4 lines down, 4 lines from the bottom of the page. Page Nun Beis. V'yesh levar ze al pi ma shekasuk b'maimer. We can explain this according to what it says in the Maimer. Behemshech ha'inyan. Again, the Rebbe Rashab's Maimer, in continuation of the concept Be'inyan ma shekasuk Reb Chaim Vital, regarding what Reb Chaim Vital says further in his explanation to the Zohar there, where he says, quote, Nimtza umis'alem umisgale begimul reishim. He says that the Ein Sof is found, hidden, and revealed in 3 heads. This is the Kabbalistic stuff. This is the quote of the Reb Chaim Vital on what means the 3 heads and what is Atik. So he says Atik or Ein Sof is found, hidden, and revealed in 3 heads. Shegimel haloshonos, those 3 different levels of language, which is found, hidden, and revealed, Nimtza, Mis'alem, and Misgale. Why does he say 3 times? Hem kamo gimel inyanim, the ata hu v'havaya. So he says these 3 levels are compared to another more common phrase where we say ata hu Hashem. Right? You are He Hashem. Right? But there's also when you say ata hu havaya, so you're also breaking Hashem down into 3 levels: you, Him, and Havaya. which is compared to Nimtza, Nis'alam, and Mizgala, found, hidden, and revealed.
What's the him? How can we get him?
Atahu Hashem. Nimtza, so the word Nimtza in the language of the Rabbi Chaim Vital, hu kamo Ata. That's the level of Ata, right? Nimtza compares with Ata. Atahu Hashem. And what is Ata? You refers to Atzmus. Right? When you're talking about you, you're directly talking to Hashem in the second person there, and you're addressing the essence. Mis'alum Misgale, therefore the next two levels down, where in the language of the Reb Chaim Vital, he said it's called hidden and revealed. Hem kamo hu v'havaya. This represents the next two levels. Ata hu Hashem. And what are those two levels? Beis Madregos Ba'or. These represent two levels of light. So Ata is the essence. Hu Hashem is two levels of light that comes out of the essence. In the language of the Chaim Vital, it's Nimtza is the essence. You're found. In other words, essence like, in other words, you're just there. And then Misalum Misgala, you're hidden and you're revealed. Again, two levels of light that come out of the essence. Everyone's confused?
The Hebrew's hard to me. It doesn't make any sense when you say Atahu.
Yeah, but that's something we say all the time. Atahu Hashem, Hashemayim Ba'al.
It's like you. I always thought it was like you are.
I know, but if you look at the actual words, it says Atahu Hashem. You or he, Hashem. Right? You following this? Yeah? Okay, three levels, essence and two levels of light. It's just different language used by Chazal and Reb Chaim Vital. Perush Nimtza. So when we say the first one is called Nimtza, found, Shu Nimtza Kamoshu Ba'atzmusu. Why we call him found? Because we're saying it's like undisturbed. It's found exactly as it is in his own essence. He's found at the highest level, means that he's found as he is in his essence. Essentially found. And by the way, these are the three heads. Therefore, we can understand what it says in the Maimer. She'ikr ha'inyan da'atik. Therefore, the ikr inyan of Atik is the Ein Sof Shebaradla. It represents the Ein Sof in the unknowable head, because that unknowable head is the essence. The way Hashem is found in His own essence is called the Atik in the unknowable head. And therefore, of course, since in general, all the three heads are just how the essence finds itself in different places, so certainly how the essence finds itself in its own place, that's the Ikar Inyan of the essence. And therefore, that's the main one of the three heads. If we're talking about what's the definition of the three heads, how Ein Sof finds itself in different places, then the Ikar place is how it finds itself in its own place, right, in the essence itself. Yeah?
Is there high Ein Sof was highest possible level here?
Yeah.
In general?
So is this what it means with
the it's the highest level.
We're talking about 3 crowns and 2 are with us and 1 is with God and it's just like the Ikar, the one that's with Hashem.
I'm nervous to say yes because there's a lot of discussion on what that represents, but in a certain sense, you're talking about 3 crowns. This is the 3 crowns. I'm not saying that I don't want to say definitively yes, but you're on the right track there. Lahosif, to add, the Alpi Abir B'Maimer, the Inyan Nimtza, as we discussed in the Rebbe Rashav's Maimer, the Inyan of Nimtza, which is the Ein Sof Nimtza B'Radla, which is the Ein Sof which is found in the unknowable head. Hushu Nimtza B'Radla, Kamoshu Ba'atzmuso, is that now there's something called Ein Sof, which is not the unknowable head, right? In other words, the unknowable head is still one of the crowns. It's just that the way where that crown is that it's indistinguishable from the Ein Sof itself. It finds itself completely united with Hashem's essence. So he says the fact is that he's Nimtza, that the Ein Sof is Nimtza B'Radla, is that it's Kamoshu Ba'atzmuso, exactly as it is in the essence itself. Yesh levar zeh, So we can explain this. Should be Yemei Shlomo has Shirus Amisis. So we can explain that in the days of Shlomo there was true wealth. Av Shelo Haya Az Hagilo Dila'asid. Even though he did not yet touch upon this unknowable head, he was only dealing with Atik, so to speak, Atik. He wasn't really dealing with the real Atik, which we now know is the third crown. So why do we say then that Shlomo had the true inyan of wealth? Ki achidish sheyeh la'asid lavo is because what's going to be in the future, hu she'az yeh giloy ha'etzem shelamayil mechinas hagiloyim. It's because in the future we're going to see the revelation of the very essence, which is higher than the revelations, higher than the light. And the inyan of the giloyim haya b'yemei Shlomo b'shleimus. But in the days of Shlomo, what he had was the perfect level of revelations. Because if you recall, there's 3 levels. 1 is the essence, 2 are revelations. So obviously, revelations themselves can come in 2 parts. You can have not complete revelations, and you can have complete revelations. Shlomo reached the 2nd level, the higher level of revelations. Therefore, he had perfect wealth because he was lacking nothing. In terms of light, he was lacking nothing. But in terms of essence, he didn't touch the essence. He only got a ray of the essence, which is all the revelations. So he had perfect wealth, because wealth means how much is revealed to you. But nonetheless, there's something big missing. He didn't have his hands on the actual essence.
And how would that translate the actual essence? I mean, he was rich and it was like
the actual essence is what Mashiach is going to have.
Peace at his time.
Right? But he didn't have Mashiach, right? Because the fact that it was temporary and it went away shows that it's not the essence. The essence, like the light, for example, is relevant to shining and not shining. Because it's not essential, it's Hashem can will there should be revelation. He can also will there should be not revelation. He can't do that with his essence, however. The essence doesn't shine or not shine. The essence is just essential. It's there forever. So unless you have your hands on the essence, you're shaykh to gullus in some way or another. Because it can always go away. So even though when it was there, it was perfect. It was the ultimate revelation. But because it could go away, and it did go away, it shows that it was not essential. Nitzchius, basically. The Indian of Nitzchius is basically what was lacking. Netzach, we're coming up not far from Yud Shvat, the famous Basi Lagani Maimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe. There's a whole section over there which discusses the Indian of Netzach and the idea of eternality. And when you get your hands on eternality, that's when you have Mamash Legula. The Midah of Netzach, he says over there, has a root all the way up in Hashem's essence. Because the only thing which is truly essential and forever is the essence of Hashem himself. The lights can come and go.
And this will be considered like in a mushal, like in a way of like when you're davening and you have a real love and like you have like it is because that's who you are, and then like but it doesn't last throughout the whole day. You know, it's like your yechida gets revealed in Tachlis Nefesh, but it only lasts for that certain period where you had Nefesh, but to maintain it and last it the whole day, it's not found. You know?
Right, so that's not eternal.
So the essence, a person, Mashiach, but if any one person had his hands on the essence and would transmit and level everybody up?
Pretty much. Like we said by Shlomo, that really he was the one that got his hands on this level of Atik. And therefore there was a base of Mikdash, and therefore there was peace in the world. In other words, it was because of him that there was peace in the world. So if Mashiach can get his hands on, if anyone can draw down this level of essence, it's everywhere. However, it's not so simple. There's a whole paragraph in this mimer regarding that very question. Let's see. Yud Aleph. Mevar ba mimer. I'm just assuming everyone kind of is following along what we said. It was a little bit complicated, that last one. If you have questions, please ask. Yeah.
3 heads is all within Atik or Atik is more than that?
Well, that's a little bit of a debate between the Arizal or the Reb Chaim Vital and the Rebbe Rashab. According to the Reb Chaim Vital, all 3 heads are called Atik. Why? Because really the Ein Sof is truly the one that's called Atik. And since the Ein Sof finds itself in one form or another in all these 3 places, therefore they're all called Atik. But according to the Rebbe Rashab, Atik is the Ein Sof, and the only place you really find Atik in the 3 heads is in the highest one. Because that's the way that that's the head that's mamish inside of the essence itself. It doesn't pop out and start to reveal. It's just the head as it is unified with the Ein Sof. Therefore, that's the Iker Inyan of Atik. Right? So it depends who you're talking about. That's actually the whole question. And we're going with the Rebbe Rasha, which means Atik, Be'emes, is really not what we said that Shlomo got his hands on Atik. That was like Lefi Erich, only an Atik. There wasn't a true Atik. Only Mashiach will have his hands on Atik, which we're now calling Panimius of Atik. Yeah. Mevar Ba'amaimer. So he explains in the Maimer da Al Yedei Shelasi Lavo Tiyam Shachas Me Panimius Atik. Then in the future we'll have this hands on Panimius Atik, which is the Ein Sof Shebarad La, the Ein Sof in this unknowable head. Shalamayil Mam Shachash Haisabi Yemei Shlomo, which is higher than what Shlomo brought down. So therefore, since we'll go higher and reach something deeper, the revelation and what we'll draw down will come even lower, as is the klal. The higher you go, the lower you can reach, right? The higher your source, the lower you can extend that source. So since we're going to go deeper into the essence, it's going to have a bigger effect on the world. As it says in the Eitz Chaim, Aliyas HaMalchus yesh zayin medregos. We talked about this a little bit in the early classes, the different partsufim. But he says this is the official word on the matter. When it comes to Malchus's elevation, there are 7 levels that Malchus can go up. Now, what does it mean, Malchus's elevation, to begin with? Malchus is like the moon, right? It's the source of the worlds, which means that something has to shine into it in order to let that light sort of go off and create an other, like the moon. So the idea that Malchus can elevate is that the world itself can go and reach higher and higher and higher levels.
What's Malchus?
Malchus is the lowest sphera of the 10 spheros. But it's the one that's responsible for actually making creation. All the other spheres are sort of God's own lights by himself. And Malchus is called speech. It's called the mouth. So out of the mouth of a human being is when what's ever inside of you starts to go to an outside. There's all of a sudden it's relevant, the external world. So Hashem is not speaking to anybody because He's the only thing. But when He, so to speak, speaks, that creates the external world. That creates different outwardness. So that level, which is now the lowest sphera, it can have elevations. In other words, you can fill it up and impregnate it with all different types of levels that are beyond it, and that represents the ability for the world to go back up into its root and experience divinity. So there's 7 levels of its journey up. And in B'yemei Shlomo, this comes from the Arizal, he says in the days of Shlomo, Hasei Madrega Havav, they got to the 6th level, Malchus. And Lasi Lavo Tia Madrega Hazayin. And in the future time, we'll get finally to the 7th level.
Isn't the 6th sphere Yisod?
They're not talking about 6 spheros, we're talking about 6 levels. And basically, those, we're going to see what they are in a second. And what's the difference between level 6 and level 7 of Malchus' Aliyah? Is that Madregas Havav, when it comes to the 6th level, Hagiloi b'Malchus, Hurak b'Tes spheros Sheba. That what happens in Malchus, the revelation that takes place in Malchus, is only in her 9 spheros. Ad l'bechinas Yesod Sheba. Until and including but not exceeding the level of Yesod, right? The 9 spheres from top to bottom, Chochma Bina Das, Chesed Gevurah Tiferes Netzach Hod, Yesod. There's 10 altogether. Malchus is the 10th, and Yesod is the 9th. So when Malchus has this tremendous aliyah, and all of a sudden it's going higher and higher and receiving more and more and more levels of divinity, when it goes to the 6th level of elevation, right? Let's figure out what the 6 are, because we kind of know already, right? We're saying that we said before there was 5 that were lacking when the world was created. What were they? Who remembers this one?
The 5 partsufim.
Yeah, what are they?
Keser, Chochma Bina.
Keser, Chochma Bina,
Malchus.
Za and Malchus, right?
That's what I said.
So that's 5, and then it makes sense, right? Because what did we say Keser was in that model? Keser represented Arich, the lower part of Keser, which is shaykh to the worlds.
Right.
So if it goes up to the 6th level, it makes sense that would be called what Shlomo reached, because he reached the level of wealth,
Higher part of
which is called the higher part of Keser, which is called, we called it Atik, right? Up until this new revelation. So now what we're saying is like this: when Malchus reaches up to the level of Atik, then there's a revelation that takes place in Malchus. Obviously, when she's having this aliyah, then what is Malchus? Like we're Malchus, the creatures of the world are having this aliyah. As you go higher and higher and higher, more and more godliness is available to you. In the days of Shlomo, they got to the 6th level, to Atik. What happened? There was a tremendous gilui of Hashem in the world. But what he's saying now is it only got to the 9 levels, the 9 spheros within inside of Malchus itself. In other words, if Malchus is its own sphera, 9 parts of her were lit up down to the Yesod. But what's the difference between getting to the 7th level, which is reaching Melech HaMashiach and this essence, which is beyond Shlomo, versus reaching Shlomo, is that we only now, in the days of Shlomo, we only got to the level of Yesod inside of Malchus. We didn't get to Malchus of Malchus. The revelation of godliness did not permeate the lowest part of Malchus itself. It only permeated up until the 2nd lowest part of Malchus itself. I'm going slow because I'm trying to just make sure everybody gets every little point here.
You think
But then how does that?
5 partsufim is Arich, Chochma, Bina, Za, and Malchus. The 6th partsuf therefore is Atik, and the 7th, which is coming in the time to come, is the essence, the Radla, the Reishit Lo Yisyada, the Penimius of Atik.
If everything like the Shlomo Melech did only lit up the 9 parts, how does that even affect the worlds? If it's only the 10th one that
No, it's the whole Malchus basically is affected on all these aliyahs, right? It's not. In other words, it's just in the world itself. The world can be extremely lit up, but there's still parts of the world that are not lit up. For example, when you are going to daven or you're going to do, something in your life, there's still there's aspects of you which are totally excited. The fact that you got to yeshiva and you're sitting in Hasidus class, obviously you're doing better than the guy who didn't make it into Hasidus class or to yeshiva. But there's still parts of you that are left behind that still have taivas associated with them. You're having an aliyah, but not the totality of you is having an aliyah. There's still parts that did not get elevated yet. Same thing is true when all this godliness is in the world. It's for sure affecting the world. The world is Malchus, and the Malchus is getting, as it goes higher and higher, it's affecting the higher and higher parts of Malchus. Right? The most pristine parts, we're still going here. The most pristine parts, right, get affected first. In other words, first you affect your mind, then you affect your heart. Then alavah you affect your, lower and lower. So as the elevation of Malchus goes higher, it starts affecting, Chochma of Malchus, Bina of Malchus, Das of Malchus, and as you get to the Keser, when you arrive at the Atik, it gets all the way down to the Yesod of Malchus. But as we said a moment ago, the higher you go, the lower your effect. So when we're going to get to the essence, then finally we're going to be able to affect Malchus of Malchus. But until such time, we haven't touched it yet. You follow?
So we still haven't reached that level.
Messianic level yet to come.
Stay tuned.
So this is what's good. The difference is that when you reach to the 6th level, you have a revelation of Malchus only in her 9 spheros up until and including Yesod. V'agilu de Malchus de Malchus, but the revelation of Malchus, Haya Aydesha Nichlala b'Yesod Shabbat. So actually, back to Mendy's point here, there was an effect on even Malchus of Malchus, because in Shlomo's days it was mamash a state of perfection. Right? So even Malchus of Malchus was actually touched. But how was it touched? It was touched in as much as the light didn't go down into Malchus of Malchus. The light went down into Yesod of Malchus only. But when the light got so close to Malchus of Malchus that it was in the Yesod of Malchus, that Malchus of Malchus saw the light in the sphere above it and jumped up into her. Let me say that again. The light came only down to Yesod of Malchus, which meant Malchus of Malchus was unaffected, as far as the light didn't go down to her level. But when the light came down to Yesod, Malchus got all excited and jumped up into Yesod. And therefore Malchus was in fact refined, but in the sense that it had to, so to speak, leave its place and get refined by going up into the Yesod. In other words, how could we explain that sort of in our frame of reference psychologically?
You got to go visit him.
Right. But I'm saying, we talked about yesterday the idea of like you have two different wills, right? We talked about the two different wills. That you can have a will, an overpowering will of Hashem.
Yeah.
And you also have a will to do whatever else you want to do, right? But if you bring an ocean of light, of an overpowering will of Hashem, it's almost like if you can't beat them, join them, basically. Your Nefesh Bahamis is going to see you're so excited about like serving Hashem, even though it really has its own agenda. In the face of such an overwhelming excitement from your godly soul, it's going to be like, all right, I'll go with you then. Right? In other words, like, I'm in, count me in. You didn't really get the light to the point that your animal soul itself was personally excited about it, but it actually got excited because of the excitement going on. You can see this all the time. Let's say the whole yeshiva is going to go on Miftzoim, or the whole yeshiva is going to wake up for Hasidus class. One guy is going to sit in bed. He's not going to want to sit in bed by himself. He's going to see everybody else is getting up, like, they must know something. I'm going to go with him. Right? But it's not like he had the impetus to get up. He had the impetus to not be left behind. Right?
So that's more from above to below as opposed.
Yeah.
And you need it for the highest level, it needs to be from below to above.
That's exactly right. But the point that he's adding in addition to that point, which is sort of he's getting to that's the main point, is that it was taka perfect in Shlomo's days. In other words, there was not a piece left out. It's just that the bottom piece, it didn't get it from below to above, it got it from above to below. Which means there was, in some sense or another, the piece left out. The guy who didn't get out of bed, or he got out of bed just because everybody else got out of bed, his will was still a corrupted will. It's just that he didn't make problems for the world. It was a perfect world. But ultimately, it wasn't fixed.
Is that one of the problems of light?
Yeah. That's exactly right. Shlomo had the perfection of revelation, but since revelation itself can succumb to the absence of revelation, that even if you have the perfect revelation, you're only dealing with revelation. You're only dealing with light. And therefore, things which are not shaykh to light, as we're going to see in a second, they don't get excited by light. Yeah. Yeah, did you have a question or no?
No, I was just thinking in terms of math.
All right. Okay, so after the parentheses, that's level Vav. That's the sixth level. That's the sixth aliyah of Malchus into Atik, regular Atik. But Madrega Hazayin, the seventh level, Hagiloi hu gam b'Malchus de Malchus. The revelation comes all the way down and reaches Malchus of Malchus. Kamoshi b'Makoma, he adds in parentheses, as she is in her place, not as she has to jump up and knock on Yesod's door. Right? It comes all the way down into Malchus of Malchus. So that's what we're looking for. Umamshich v'Maimer, he goes on. Shachiluk de beis aliyos de Malchus. That the difference between these two elevations of Malchus, the aliyah havav, the sixth level up, should be Yemei Shlomo, that was in the days of Shlomo. V'aliyah zayin shitiyeh lasilav, on the seventh, which will be in the future. Hu gam benogeh lanitzotzo shenaflu lamata. This has everything to do affecting the sparks that fell below. That as she's rising up, her sparks are being refined. So when you get the difference between level 6 aliyah and level 7 aliyah has everything to do with the ability to actually refine all of her sparks. Va'inyanhu, meaning the yesod de nukva, hu hiskashtus hamakabel malchus b'mashpia za. Right? He gets into some technical stuff here, but in the context, he actually makes all kinds of things make sense which don't normally make sense. Yesod de nukva. What is yesod de nukva? You actually hear this phrase often.
What is it?
What is yesod de nukva? Anyone can sort of fill me in on that?
Yesod was Nukva.
Okay, well that's going to be...
Wait, Nukva is Malchus.
we'll take the next one.
Malchus of Yesod.
Yesod of Malchut.
Yesod of Malchus.
Yesod.
Nice. You almost had it. Yesod Nukva is Malchus. Yesod of Nukva is the Yesod of Malchus, which we spoke about a minute ago. But every sphera has a certain definition, a certain trait. What is the trait of Yesod? Is the idea of hiskashrus. Right? The idea of Yesod represents also the genitalia. Right? This is how you join to another human being. Right?
What's the
Hiskashrus, to join. Right? It's also, the Alter Rabbi says in Tanya, it's also when it comes to joining to, let's say, a student. Right? The Yesod is it's the same kind of concept. It's like the passion and the real connectedness between the teacher and the student. So you could have all the wisdom, you could have all the interest in giving, you could have the contractions that you're going to give in accordance to the parameters of what the student can handle. But if you don't have the sod, which means you're not looking in their eyes and actually connecting and making sure that they're paying attention to you and you're paying attention to them like a child, it's like it could just be completely over their head, or they could be like glued to you. You're telling them the best story they ever heard. That difference is really where it's going to come together or not. In other words, there could be a lot of hand holding and kissing, but you're not going to make a baby unless you're joined. You know what I'm saying? And the same thing is true when it comes to teacher and student, father and son. It's mamish the joining of the two things. This is the hiskashrus. It's also what we call our connection with the Rabbi, by the way. It's called hiskashrus, which means if you're not, you can learn about it and you can this, that, and the other thing. If you're not mamish like looking at the Rebbe and he's looking at you and you're like having this relationship and it's all sort of scholastic to a certain degree. Right. So he's saying that Yesod, so there's Yesod of the man, there's the Yesod of the woman. Right? Each one has their own, the child and the father, they both have their own connecting sensors. Right? So the Yesod, the Nukva, what we're saying is called the Yesod of the female in this scenario, because we're talking about Malchus right now, who represents the woman. It's the Yiskashrus of the Makabel, it's the interest of the receiver to the Mashpia, to desire and really want deeply to connect to the one who's giving her the Hashpah. Makes sense now, right? And that's Zah. So the Yesod of Malchus is anyway sort of always looking to it, like the sphere of Yesod in its own right, it's able to be aroused. It has an interest to connect.
Don't they both have a custom interest?
Yeah, they both have an interest. That your sphere of Yesod, if you can get to it, like that means you want to connect. So if the light of Shlomo has gotten down to the sphere of Yesod of Malchus, right? It means he struck on the nerve inside of the world where Mamish wants deeply to connect to Hashem.
So Shlomo is the mashpia there.
No.
In this case, that he gives the light to the receiver, which is
the world.
Okay,
all right, I can hear that. Right, but the point we're saying is that whatever light, whether it was Shlomo or the light that he brought, that's kind of what I was thinking, right? Shlomo was the conduit to this light of the 6th level, which is Atik, the lower level of Atik. A lot of details here. When that light comes down, what it does is it triggers on the standpoint of the receiver a deep interest to connect.
Who's the receiver?
The world.
The world, okay.
Right? Yeah.
What's the difference between the light of Moshe and the light of Shlomo?
Moshe brought the lowest level of Keser, which is called Arich, which is still a little bit worldly. It's above the world, but it's a little bit worldly. Whereas Atik is completely beyond the world. That's what Shlomo brought. And the Mashiach will bring the inner dimension of Atik. Okay? There's 3 crowns. Those are the 3 heads, by the way. Now, so if he hits the Yesod of Nukva, the Yesod of Malchus, which is basically triggering the interest of the woman, which is the world, to join to the Mashpia, she's like desiring to experience light from above. Where Malchus of Malchus is B'derech Klal Koach HaPol Shebenifa. Now he's explaining, but what's Malchus of Malchus? Fine, I get it. There's the interest to connect, the aspect of the world which has an interest to connect. But what's Malchus of Malchus, therefore? It's what we call Koach HaPoel Benifal. The power of the doer inside of the deed. In other words, this is where like sort of separateness comes into play. That Hashem enters His ability, His godly light, separates it from Himself and puts it inside of the entity that He's creating. the power of Hashem that sort of gets siphoned off and enters into the thing that he's making. The true Or Panimi, right? The light that's vested into the vessels in the most separated way. Right? That everything it's still godliness, and it's for sure godliness. But the fact is that it's the life force that's inside of each and every one of us that we think we're alive, right? There's like your own like heartbeat and your life force that's going on inside of you. That's also Hashem. But the difference is that it's the part of you that you think is you, and every little entity in the whole creation has that part of them. It's the life. It's the part of that God that like siphons itself up and pops up in the created being, right? So it's the created being's true feeling of yesh. His own understanding of not his yesod, where he's all goo-goo-eyed in order to connect to his source, because that's the aspect of yesod inside of the woman, who's interested in joining the source of her light. This is the Malchus of a Malchus, the koach hapol shebenifal, where it already disconnects and it's just sort of the entity itself, not the entity's interest to join, which is going up one level. You getting this? No, is anyone else getting this?
So when they say, like in Western philosophy, that would be like individual ego.
Mm-hmm. It's more really than just your ego, because your ego, you can have an ego which is interested in God even, can't you? Your ego is just like your personality. Your personality can be filled with all kinds of higher level things. Your personality, you can nullify your ego in the sense that while you're, but no. But the idea is that this is just, I don't know. It's actually your life force inside of you. Because the only reason I don't want to say it's your ego is because the part of your ego can long for God. There's a part of your ego which, if you want to, it can get all excited about God, and that's already the yesod of yourself, because it has an interest in joining something higher. So the truth of the matter is, I just don't know enough about the actual technical word ego to answer your question. That's probably really what's going on here. I don't know.
It means I.
It means I, but again, the I can be turned on for God, and here we're talking about at the level of I, which is just the basic level of your own life force. Before, in other words, the very material that you're working with, before this material starts to have an experience towards going up. Yeah? Is anyone not getting this? Should I explain again?
The material itself is
It's Malchus sheba Malchus. Koach hapoah sheba nifal.
And that poil is coming from the Abishur himself.
Everything comes from the Abishur, but that part feels like it's independent.
Malchus of Malchus.
Yeah. Whereas Yesod of Malchus is already the arousal from perspective of the Yesh to want to join to her source, just like
which is before the independence.
Yeah.
That's what makes that happen.
I mean, the independent is sort of like sitting there all the time. But if you arouse the level of Yesod of the independent, it means he's turned on to going to joining his mashpia, right? So when the life force of Ati comes down and it triggers Yesod, it means that the world has a part of it which is triggered to going into and joining to its mashpia. But it leaves out Malchus of Malchus, which means there's a part which is sort of left behind. Yeah, the entity. In other words, he said Malchus of Malchus gets lifted up with Yesod of Malchus, because if you're turned on, you're going to turn on your body and you're going to take yourself and go. But the only reason you're taking yourself and going is because there was a part of you which got turned on. The body itself didn't necessarily get turned on. The body itself is not shaykh to getting turned on because it's lower than Yesod. It doesn't get turned on. It just is. But when you get turned on, the being turned on brings your is and it brings it up. So even in the days of Shlomo, we said Malchus of Malchus was elevated. It's just it didn't touch it in its own place. It touched it by touching Yesod, and then it went up with Yesod.
It's interesting. It seems like the final stage or the messianic stages, there's still going to be a separation between, there's so many separate entities. Because Malchus and Malchus will be coming down there, but there's still, people won't be nullified. People will be still.
It's not me.
People will be nullified, but we'll have to see the technicalities of that.
Okay.
Is there progeny? Is there progeny in this relationship?
There is. It's the birth of mitzvahs, the birth of Elokus into the world, right? When the world will sort of join with Hashem, so Hashem, then they have a baby, which is basically Elokus from above, comes down and presents itself into this world. It turns into a Sefer Torah, a mitzvah. Godliness appears in the physical world through this. All right. Let's go on. I don't know if I can explain it again. I think that's pretty much does it there for me. I don't know. Is anyone totally confused still at this point?
I'm ready to roll.
I'm good.
It's
You
good,
good?
it's good.
All right, let's move on a little bit. We'll see if we can get somewhere with this. And therefore, b'yamei Shlomo, in the days of Shlomo, sha'agilu b'malchus, hayarak b'dargas ha'malchus kamosha shayeches lazah, since the revelation came down into Malchus, all the way down to and up into and only Yesod, which is a level which is already relevant to Zah. In other words, that level of Malchus has an interest towards Zah. Right? So the part of the world that was touched was only that part of the world which anyway had a shaykhs to going up and being relevant to Elokus. Because the sphera of Yesod has a passion for what's above it. So that's as far as godliness came down into the world. It came down to a world which was relatively interested in it anyway. Yesod of Malchus. Therefore, Gam ha'alad ha'nitzotzo shenaf lamata. Therefore, also the elevation of the sparks that had fallen down below. Ha'sarak ba'osam ha'nitzotzo sheshayachim la'argish or eloki. Hopefully, this line will bring it together for those who are not totally with us yet. It means that the sparks that were elevated in the times of Shlomo, the elevation of those sparks that fell down was only in those sparks that anyway had some feeling for Elokus to begin with. In other words, Shlomo did not really affect the entire world. There was some pushed off nations and aspects of reality that were just not interested in going to Jerusalem. They're basically like, they couldn't care less. They were like wicked, disgusting people. Who went to Jerusalem? Anyone who was like searching for wisdom and they heard that in a far-off place in Jerusalem, God resides there. They picked up themselves and traveled there. That was a big deal. Because these people were basically idol worshippers, but they heard of the true God, so they were excited to go check it out. But there were still entities that had no interest whatsoever of connecting to the Mashpia. Right? Because they come from Malchus of Malchus. And Malchus of Malchus is pre-Yesod level. It's pre any interest. It's almost like a child who doesn't have yet a desire for the reproductive, act. He just have not developed his Yesod. Once you have a Yesod, you're shaykh to being aroused. So if something will arouse you, you'll be aroused. But if you can take all the fancy, XXX movies in the world, an infant is not going to be turned on by that. Because he's just not in the, sorry for the analogy, it's the only thing I can think of. But there's no level of Yesod in these entities to even get aroused by the godliness which is coming from the Mashpia. There's just not a kli whatsoever to arousing them. So therefore, even though you're going to bring this most, the sexiest level of godliness that exists, anyone who's shy to being turned on by that, they're going to go move to Jerusalem. But there still were people that didn't even have a Yesod yet. So therefore, they didn't get excited, and therefore they didn't get elevated, they didn't get refined. Right?
The ones that did get excited, they were still limited, but when they got to Shlomo, they were...
The ones that were excitable got excited when they saw the godliness. And they all gave their wives and their daughters and their gold to Shlomo. Right? But the ones that were not excitable, since Shlomo didn't bring a level that went beyond Yesod, he was only able to bring a level of Elokus that touched the level of Yesod. So if you, in other words, it went down to Malchus' level of Yesod. It went down to her excitable level, that which is interested in what's above her. But beyond that, it didn't go down. So anything which didn't have a Yesod was just like an entity which is uninterested in godliness. It didn't get interested in that level of godliness.
So there were sparks that weren't raised.
Sparks that weren't raised.
This is our level now.
That got left behind in the days of Shlomo. And that's kind of the whole purpose of this paragraph. That not only was the light in the elevation went to a different place up, it also went to a different place down because there were sparks that did not get elevated from Shlomo's time. Now we said, And this was what was in parentheses. They actually did get elevated to some degree because they got schlepped out of bed with the rest of their friends. In other words, they got pulled up. The world was a perfect place, but because they were okay, so they took they took anyone who wasn't interested with them.
So they went to the party, but they didn't dance.
Right? Exactly.
Why were they? Why were they not excitable? Were they cut off first?
Because the level of godliness, they were so low. I said the analogy. It's like a child. He doesn't even have a kli of getting excited.
Why? Why are they so?
They
so
fell
low?
very low. Why does a child not getting turned on by anything? Basically, he's at a certain level of existence where he has not developed himself to experience that part of life. So these sparks fell so low, they didn't even have the basic ability to be interested in God.
They couldn't taste it. They just didn't know.
We can all relate to this, right? In other words, when we all Baal Tshuvas over here. When you came to this yeshiva, there was already a part of you which was searching for something, obviously. But you can probably remember back to a part of you which was not interested in searching for anything. You went to the party and danced, and that's all you did, right? You weren't like looking for a higher thing. You weren't looking for some meaning in life. You just weren't even looking for it. It wasn't even there. It didn't even occur to you, right? So Queen Sheba, she came to Shlomo. She was already looking for something, you know. But there's parts of the world that are just dumb as rocks. They're not even looking to get turned on by Hashem.
Well, that's what happened with Shlomo. He got messed up from that.
Yo, we're just getting warmed up here.
That's what happened with Shlomo. He messed around too much, and then that was his downfall. I mean,
No, I don't know if you could say that happened to Shlomo himself, can you?
The Egyptian with his last wife.
Right, I understand, but how does that have to do here?
Because it's like kind of like okay, fine.
No, I like it. I was kind of just pushing you to go say more.
Think about it more.
What's
There's something left.
Yeah.
Something left
It's
in
great.
Shlomo that he wasn't able to elevate all this far.
I think we just got down to the actual. We answered the big question that was was before us a few times. Like, how did Shlomo marry this girl? It's like weird, that he didn't know. But this all comes together in what you just said, Yosef. The last one was one of them was Bas Paro, who was not able to get turned on, basically, to Yiddishkeit. This I kind of just said it. She converted to Judaism, but not with her full heart. So what does that show you? She got dragged along with the party. She went to the party, but she didn't dance. In other words, she was from Mitzrayim, the ultimate level of Klippa. Shlomo didn't have the power. It's exactly what we're saying, actually. I don't know if anyone's ever put these pieces together. Someone should write this down. Right? This is exactly what happened. Shlomo, he brought everything he had. Any woman who had any interest to convert to Judaism, she did. But there was this Bas Paro. She came from the lowest level. Mitzrayim is the lowest of all the levels. She got schlepped into the party. She wound up marrying him. She wound up converting to Judaism, but her heart wasn't in it because it was such a level that there was baseline. She couldn't get excited about anything regarding a mashpia. And so he had to marry her because he had to, like, so to speak, perfect the world, bring everything he could up with him. But since he couldn't bring a light high enough to go down into a level which was not even interested in elevation, so there was nothing he could do about that. It was like it was a flaw, but it wasn't something he did wrong. It was like the peak of his level couldn't get down that low.
Was he aware of all this?
We are. That's the main thing right now.
What's up?
That's cool, right? Do you understand what we're saying? That's sort of like, we had like a big question, like how could Shlomo make such a mistake and so forth, but it was literally beyond his powers to reach to a place of someone who's not interested. Someone who has a spark of interest, he can get them to convert to Judaism, come look at God. But someone who's mamish doesn't care whatsoever, can't even care less about it, what can you do for such a person? Okay, he converted them, he married them, but they didn't do it with a full heart because they didn't have any interest in God.
Why?
Because there's
Why marry them? Why convert them?
Because at the end of the day, he couldn't leave the world. He had to do everything he could, right? So in other words, let's say there's a guy lying in bed, right? You can't just leave him there. Even if he's going to come to class and walk out. Better he should come to class and walk out, right? You have to do everything you can. You can't just leave him there, right? So it's the same thing. In other words, it's a problem. The light that you're bringing is not enough to mamish get to such a person. But you get to everything you can, and whatever's not coming, you just schlep him in anyway. You can only do what you can do, right? So this is what Shlomo did. He brought only a limited level of light that he could bring. It was only anyone who was interested, they came, right? If someone who's not interested, he just made them come anyway, because it's what the best I can do. I can't just leave a part of the world completely unrefined. That's what we said, that Malchus of Malchus, it got refined because it entered up into and drawn into the Yesod of Malchus, but not in its own place. It didn't get refined.
Well, so what was Shlomo lacking though that didn't let him get?
Panemius of Atik. He was lacking the essence. All he had was light.
And was that because of something he did?
Probably. I mean, I don't know. Yes and no. I mean, in a certain sense, it just wasn't time. You know, I think in a certain sense, what really was lacking, to be honest with you, was the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. That he couldn't give us something that's called Chorban by Beis Hamikdash when he was busy bringing us Beis Hamikdash.
So there needed to be another descent.
Yeah, there needed to be another descent in order to go up that high. So it's like it was beyond his power again, like we said a few times. Not because probably he didn't have it in him. It wasn't his time.
But this is like a healthy step, though, where a person can feel like kind of like in his pedestal in a certain sense, and you know, and then ultimately come to this high measure that we're speaking about, like the last level. But this is a necessary step. It's like a baby step. Without Shlomo doing what he did, without bringing that light, we wouldn't even be, you know, shaykh to such a. I mean.
Yeah, we love it, man. Shlomo brought Atik. Yeah.
What's Shayachim?
Shayachim is connected, related.
Is the whole world ready now?
Yes.
Why?
Because we have our hands on the unknowable head. It's called Chassidus. That's the next. I told you I'm learning this whole mimer to get to this kuntrus about Chassidus, which is called Radlah. The unknowable head, the material that we're learning right now. The Chassidus, its origin is from this place called Radlah.
Radlah is higher than.
It's the unknowable head. It's the essence of Hashem. That's what the Rabbi says in the Sikha that we're going to learn down the road here.
Rabbi,
I think we have to hold here, unfortunately. We're out of time.
I was gonna ask.
I felt looks being given to me when I was choking. Is this just like everyone?
I was gonna ask, like, if it's the only way that we can like get this part of us,
Those don't manage
like,
to get a year or something. If they die.
to give itself. There's like this part of us
Yeah.
that's like not involved. Like,
Right.
sometimes it's like this other side.
Right.
Right? So I was gonna ask, is it only like when Mashiach comes in that will actually like fully be like gone? Or we can actually do that before?
No, it's all about doing it before. The secret really is, the only way to get that part excited is that you got to be in the headspace of that part, which we are, unfortunately, and from that space, lift ourselves up. In other words, that part will not be inspired by shining light on it. It will only be inspired, as we're going to see as the days come, by itself. It has to basically come to the realization that it itself is godly. The only way you can do that is with Chassidus, because Chassidus has the ability to explain to the Nefesh HaBahamis, in the terminology of the Nefesh HaBahamis, that it's Elokus. Not by showing it, which is something which is going to wow it, which is beyond it, and then draw it up to godliness, even though you didn't really bring it in its place. So you need a certain light level of something. That you need a level of godliness that can explain to a rock, in the rock's own mind, that it's godliness, and that's what Chabad Chassidus is.
This wife that he couldn't level up because she was on such a low level. That's like where we are now, right?
That's us. Yeah, we're the wife. We're Bas Paro.
That unknowable.
I was wondering if I
According
could
to
read with
Judaism,
you,
We're just
so I
talking
could
about
bid-
the class.
So I could
let's-
bid that.
I asked that yesterday. In Judaism,
One second.
that unknowable
Yeah.
can never be knowable because it's God, right?
Right.
But can the unknowable ever know himself? Because it's always expanding. So if you say no, you'll say, well, then how could God not know? But he's always not knowing. So
No, the ultimate level is that the light and the essence are happening at the same time. Because by God, that's how it is. He has essence and light simultaneously. So by everything else, it's like if you have essence, you don't see light. And if you have light, you don't see essence. And that's the problem we're having. Shlomo brought all the light. That thing which really came from the ultimate essence, it's like talking to the wall because it's not interested in light. But by Hashem, Mamish, the light and the essence aren't able to happen simultaneously. In other words, strangely, you are actually able to bring the essence to light. Not by stepping down, but by showing the essence itself, like turning, that's what we call turning darkness itself into light. So at that stage, the rock can realize that it's Elokus.
Well, a certain level of Elokus.
No, the highest of all highest levels of Elokus.
The rock could.
The rock itself is the highest of all highest levels of Elokus.
Can we say that? And it experiences the Ein Sof?
Yeah, and not only did it anyway is the Ein Sof, but it's not experiencing it. And the Chiddush, usually what happens is, if it experiences it, it stops being a rock.
So
But what we're saying now is that as it is a rock, it experiences. It's the essence and light at the same time.
So if that's true, and when the resurrection did happen, then it's like everybody's going to be walking around
in total enlightenment.
in total enlightenment, but they're still
Going to be a rock.
but it's they're all going to be experiencing their own
Self. But that self will simultaneously be
There.
God.
That's the big thing.
Right.